Welcome to Volleyball State, your look at volleyball in 6 rotations. Here are your hosts, Jeff Sheldon and Lincoln Arneal.
Hello and welcome to Volleyball State, a look at the sport of volleyball in 6 rotations and a proud part of the Hurrdat Sports family. I'm Jeff Sheldon.
And I'm Lincoln Arneal.
Today on the show, the kind of win few of us saw coming, at least I didn't, as Nebraska goes into Madison and sweeps Wisconsin. We're going to break down one of the Huskers' biggest wins of the year to jumpstart. It's going to be a pivotal November for the Huskers. Plus some college volleyball chaos this week as Stanford and Texas both get rude welcomes in their new conferences. Plus, we'll talk with Chad Gordon of volleydork.com, who's one of the leading voices of advanced volleyball stats that can help us all understand the game just a little bit better. Plus, a look ahead to Nebraska's Pacific Northwest road trip this week and a whole lot more. First, Lincoln, tell the folks how they can find us in all of the places we are in the zeitgeist.
Yes, make sure that you are following along with at Volleyball Pod on Twitter. We also put out TikTok videos of my recaps after matches. You can follow along with me. I do my in-game tweeting at Lincoln_VB. I write articles for Huskers Illustrated. I put out a weekly kind of recap on Substack and so much more. So we got a lot going on, and it's a fun time to be. This is why we follow college volleyball.
Yeah.
We're getting the fun part of the year.
One of the cool parts, I think, of the Substack, because I am a loyal Volleyball State Substack reader, it's a great prep piece to preview the weekend. So unless there has been a big match that happened on Wednesday or Thursday, it's a great thing to kind of read on Friday mornings to get your finger on the pulse of what the weekend in college volleyball is going to look like. So I'd encourage everyone who loves this show or tolerates the show to check out the Substack.
Yes, for sure. I try to find out what the biggest matches are and also put where you can watch them, because sometimes is it on ACC Network Extra? I don't know. Is it on BTN? Who knows? So they put all these matches on 20.
Do we have any volleyball matches on like the CW yet?
Ooh,
I mean, we got to be pretty close to like Paramount Plus or something.
Yeah, we'll get there. Hopefully, but we got a jam-packed show. So here's our rotational setup. Rotation 1, we will talk about the Wisconsin sweep, and then we'll follow that up with rotation 2 with Nebraska's other match of the week against Northwestern. Rotation 3, our guest Chad Gordon will talk us all through the details and statistical analysis. He'll make your brain go a little bit, which it'll be great. And then rotation 4, we'll talk about the Big Ten. Rotation 5, we'll have results from around the nation. And when the rotation 6, we'll close up by looking at the week ahead. So I thought we could start. We could talk about I ran a half marathon in Madison on Friday. Why not? Like, we want to talk about
a half marathon. You ran a half marathon last weekend too.
I know, I got bored. It was a lovely afternoon in Madison, so I ran around the lake, and I was about a half mile away from my hotel. So, you know what? Just got to do one every month. That was November.
Show off.
Knocked it out.
So this was my thought on Friday night after Nebraska swept Wisconsin. If you had forced me to gamble on this volleyball match, and there were only 2 gambling options, it was either Nebraska sweeps Wisconsin or the field of the range of any other options, from tight Nebraska win to dominating Wisconsin sweep. I'm trying to think how much money I would have bet on the field of options that was not Nebraska sweeping Wisconsin.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Every dime I could have cobbled together.
Get your second mortgage out.
I would have done that. Nebraska sweeps Wisconsin 25-21, 25-22, 25-19. And that brings some notable landmarks. Did you want to say something real quick?
Well, I said that, I think if you told me that the match ended in a sweep, I thought, well, Wisconsin continue their dominance. I mean, I was in the same mindset going into that match too. Of that was the least probable outcome too. So I agree. I was not you, Jeff. I was in the same mindset that I didn't think a Nebraska sweep was in the cards. If Nebraska won, it was going to be 4 or 5 sets.
Exactly. Well, Nebraska did sweep 25-21, 22, and 20 and 19. It was the Huskers' first win of any kind in Madison since 2013. So for the first time in 11 years, Nebraska wins at Wisconsin. It snaps Wisconsin's 25-match home winning streak, which dates back to, I believe, last year. And it was the first time that Wisconsin was swept at home in the UW Fieldhouse since 2016, when Minnesota did it kind of at the peak of their powers.
Yeah, their last home loss was the end of the 22 season, they lost to Pitt in the regional round too. So they went undefeated last year in the 23 season. So it's a long streak for sure and very impressive.
And Nebraska does it, kind of in the only way I think Nebraska could have swept Wisconsin, which is this was not a sexy volleyball match with both teams hitting, high percentages. This was Big Ten volleyball. Nebraska held Wisconsin below 100 hitting for the first time all year. 094 Wisconsin hit, and I read that was the lowest hitting percentage for Wisconsin in a match since 2016. So 8 years since Wisconsin has hit that low. Wisconsin kind of loaded up on Sarah Franklin, as you thought they might, their best player, and she got her kills, but even she was missing sometimes. Nebraska threw a triple block at her a lot of the time, and then the other pieces of Wisconsin's puzzle just didn't play well. Anna Smrek hit negative, 6'9" Anna Smrek. I don't think the setting was that great for Wisconsin, but she had 8 kills, 10 errors, and Wisconsin just could not get in a rhythm offensively against Nebraska, who outblocked Wisconsin. That's another metric. If you had allowed me the chance to wager on who would have more blocks in the match, Nebraska, Wisconsin, I probably would have, been very leveraged on the side of the Badgers, who are one of the best blocking teams in the country. Nebraska actually outblocked Wisconsin 10-9, including, I think officially it was 6 blocks in game 1. Rebecca Alec deserves a lot of credit there. She was on the giving end of 7 of those blocks, but just a defensive masterpiece from Nebraska, aided a little bit by, I think, a Wisconsin team that was not firing on all cylinders.
I think the main takeaway we have is there's a reason why we don't gamble on sports. Because this went completely different, and that the Wisconsin finished with
never gamble on sports.
Yes, and Wisconsin finished with 9 blocks, and I think that was the first time they had a streak of 8 straight,
7 or 8 matches,
in a row, double digit. I mean, it only went 3 sets, so that kind of, had it gone 4, they would have got there. But Nebraska really did a good job of hitting around the block and not letting Wisconsin's physicality really dictate that. It started from the get-go. The second point of the whole match, Nebraska stuffed Sarah Franklin, and that kind of set the tone, I felt like, for the entire proceedings ahead of it.
Well, offensively, it was great to see Taylor Landfair come out and have the kind of match that I think every Nebraska fan was envisioning her having when she transferred to Nebraska. She didn't hit for a gaudy percentage, but she had 13 kills, which was a team high. She led Nebraska in kills. Merritt Beeson had a great match, including, Merritt has sort of become the set closer on this team, which is what you want your big guns to do. Had 11 kills and hit 391. And, we've got a list of takeaways that we're going to hit on here. But one of the biggest ones that I had was Nebraska's was the better team by a not small margin against Wisconsin in the late set situations. Like once a team hit 17, 18 points, Nebraska just hammered down the rest of the way. And I don't know how many times I've watched, a Nebraska match against a Texas or a Wisconsin where it seems like, Wisconsin was the team that was making the plays at the end of sets, and Nebraska would sort of tease you with being right there at 20, 21, only to lose the set. Well, Nebraska was the team that pulled away at the end of each of the sets on Friday night. And that to me is really highly of Nebraska's, I would say, mental toughness to go on the road in a place like that, which is, Lincoln, you were there. Tell us a little bit about the atmosphere. Like, what did it feel like in there?
Oh, it felt, I was also there last year, November. So I've been at the last 2 Nebraska-Wisconsin matches in Madison too. And it felt like a big game atmosphere. The fans were all excited. They still have the one section of general admission seating on the end, and fans were lined up for 12 hours before the match started to get those seats. So there was a lot of electricity in the building. And the Nebraska did a great job of suppressing that at times too by going on those scoring runs. But even when Wisconsin went on runs, it really got there was one time where Merritt Beeson, one of her only errors of the whole match, got blocked from a back row attack that just the ball went straight down. It set the crowd into a tizzy. But Nebraska, again, that resilience, that late game confidence, composure, that this is a veteran team. They know how to handle this. They responded well and really kind of, it helped that they were up when most of those Wisconsin runs happened. So when they had to rebound, they were only down 2 or 3 points. Yeah. So, but they really handled the atmosphere, and it was a great environment. And the fans did leave very quickly. By the time I had the match ended, I filed my immediate story. I had a clear aisle to get to the floor, so they got out of there quick. But it was a good atmosphere.
Well, let me ask you this, Lincoln. Nebraska has beaten Louisville this season in Louisville. They beat Stanford at home. They beat Creighton at home. Those are the highest ranked teams that Nebraska has beaten before playing Wisconsin. But to go on the road like this and sweep Wisconsin, even though Wisconsin's not having like maybe as good a season as they were last year, like they were as hot as any team in the country coming into this match. Do you think this is Nebraska's best win of the season to this point?
I say yes. I mean, going into Louisville and Stanford, I felt like Nebraska was the better team on the court, not just with the level of play they were doing, but just after watching those teams early on. But Wisconsin was playing elite volleyball. They easily dispatched Purdue last weekend, and so and also given
on the road too, right? That was in West
on the road. Yeah, Louisville was on the road too, but the history that Nebraska has with Wisconsin, of the 10 straight loss streak that they finally snapped last year, haven't won in more than a decade in Madison. And just, I don't know if the mental advantage that Wisconsin just kind of had, because this has happened before too. I mean, Nebraska won the first set in 2021 and then lost the next three. I think it just, for what Nebraska was able to accomplish and to do it in a sweep, I think it's their best win, even though it's not the win over the highest rated opponent.
So Wisconsin is going to have the chance to return the favor in Lincoln on Saturday, November 23rd. This is one of the only, I would say, Big Ten challengers that Nebraska is going to play twice this season. So they're going to get another look at Wisconsin in Lincoln at the end of this month. But Lincoln, kind of like you had said earlier, Nebraska never really had to chase in this game.
No,
they were either in the lead or very close within striking distance throughout. And every big run that Wisconsin made, Nebraska might get out to a 3-point lead and Wisconsin would go on a 3-0 run to tie it, or a 5-0 run to go up by 2. We're going to get through the set breakdowns here in a little bit, but I know in both game 2 and game 3, they were sets of big swings of points. Like Nebraska would run off 4 in a row and Wisconsin would come back and run off 4 in a row. And so it was a big time fight. But Nebraska never was in a position where you look up and they're down 15-10 in a season.
Their biggest deficit the entire match was 3 points, and that's after Wisconsin went on that 9-1 run in the second set we'll talk about. But so, I mean, Nebraska was playing in front most of the match too, and it was just great composure, and there was no panic whenever Nebraska did give up a run. It's like, regroup and do that too. So let's look at some of our other big takeaways too. I mean, we've kind of talked about the runs and the best win of the season, but what else were your takeaways, Jeff?
Yeah. Well, even though there was tons of all eyes are going to be on your hitters in this match, Merritt Beeson, Harper Murray, Taylor Landfair, and Wisconsin side Sarah Franklin. Nebraska won this match because their littles were better, I thought. Wisconsin has a freshman ball handling battery. So their libero, Lola Schumacher, is a freshman. Their setter, Charlie Fearbringer, is a freshman. And I think Nebraska exploited that. They won the match because their littles were better. Lexi Rodriguez had a 75% good pass rating, which is outstanding. You almost take it for granted that she's going to put up something like that. That means Nebraska was in system more than Wisconsin was. Lainey Choboy had a good pass percentage of 61%, Olivia Mauk 53%. Wisconsin didn't target one Nebraska player in their serving game. They spread it around. And once again, Olivia Mauk might be, the best freshman DS in the country right now. She handled a team high 15 serves. Meanwhile, Nebraska went right at Lola Schumacher, who I believe went to the same club and high school program as Kenzie Knuckles. She was a Munciana kid, and Nebraska served at her 30 times, and she did not hold up to that the entire match. Put Charlie Fearbringer in some tough positions where she was having to set balls that were not in ideal positions. And that's one reason why it kind of became the Sarah Franklin show. Wisconsin wasn't in system the whole time. They weren't able to run their middles. They didn't get Smrek some great looks. And so every set just went left to Sarah Franklin. And Franklin's good enough that you can win a match that way against most teams. But, Nebraska had 3 blockers sitting there waiting for when it happened. So, I think Nebraska saw on film they could target a freshman libero playing right back in. So Nebraska just served zone 1 over and over and over again and made that pass come from over Charlie Freerbringer's, back shoulder and just made those freshmen uncomfortable.
Yeah, I think to go to your point about their middles too. I mean, Wisconsin runs kind of a typical offense where sometimes Anna Smrek will play middle and they switch their middles and right sides frequently. But the three players who are labeled as middle blockers, Carter Booth, CC Crawford, and Devin Robinson, combined for 4 kills, 5 errors on 19 attacks. So they're, complete non-factor. And that was a lot of because of the differential, like you mentioned, the passing differential. Nebraska was able to get their middles involved. And I mean, not great nights from them too, but they were at least getting them attacks and getting them kills. So,
well, Sarah Franklin in this match took 49 swings, which was more than the next two Wisconsin, the next two highest attackers combined. Anna Smrek had 27 swings. We mentioned her numbers earlier, 10 errors, 8 kills. So Anna Smrek, who killed Nebraska 2 years ago in the national championship match, hit negative. And everyone else just had 41 swings for Wisconsin. So if Sarah Franklin wasn't getting it done, then it was really no one else was picking up the slack. And as good as Franklin is, and I saw the range of her vision and the types of shots that she sees and she can hit, she just flat out missed on some. That surprised me. She hit a ball 2 feet wide when normally she can hit to zone 2, that short cross corner. And I think Nebraska, sometimes you got to get lucky that the other team's best player is just going to miss some shots. And Nebraska made it hard on her by throwing 2 or 3 blockers at her.
Yeah, I think that's the key part about having that third blocker at the net. That third blocker takes away that sharp angle where she can hit it inside of a 2-person block. You put that third person on the net, and it really makes it difficult to hit over something that wide. And the angle you have is then out of bounds. So that was a good thing. We've seen Nebraska do that for back row attacks, but never a lot for a left band. That was kind of the one wrinkle that Nebraska threw at Wisconsin. So expect for them to try to game plan for that the next go around.
And offensively, we mentioned Taylor Landfair at the top of the show. She delivered in a way that, I don't think she has in any other match this year for Nebraska. She had 13 kills. And what happens with Landfair sometimes is if she gets blocked once or if she misses, everything becomes tentative and she starts tipping and sending soft roll shots over to a waiting defender. She stayed aggressive on Friday night, even in a way that I don't think she did on Sunday afternoon against Northwestern. She was still putting away balls, even though she had some early errors. And, I think you have a note in here that she was reminded by the coaches on the bench, hey, just keep swinging, keep bringing the heat. And she absolutely did. She thundered some balls down on Friday against Wisconsin.
Yeah, because the first 2 attacks, I have my notes, my play-by-play notes, they were soft roll shots that both got stuffed. I mean, they weren't they were bad attacks. But then I think that's when the coaches kind of talked to her and said, Jordan Cook specified Jordan Larson, especially, he went over and talked to her and said, you got to swing away. We'll take a block if you're swinging hard, as opposed to putting a tip and getting a tip stuff, or making a tip is a lot easier to dig. So that was big difference. Good for her. And then I think after those first couple of swings, she really became a lot more aggressive. She swings a nice heavy ball. So she may have had better totals, but I think that was her best match at Nebraska.
And I don't have the box score right in front of me, but she had a couple blocks too. She was a force at the net. She might have had 3 blocks. The other shot she loves to hit is she likes to go for that back line, that deep far corner. And, it can be a hit or miss shot sometimes. She's so tall, you're sort of surprised when she hits it out, but she does sometimes. Well, she wasn't missing it against Wisconsin. She was landing it inside that back corner. And, that was another 2-point swing each of the times that she was able to land those shots. So Landfair was really good. Mira Beast was really good. Harper Murray got, I think, what you needed from her. She didn't, blow it away on the stat sheet. And this was a match where Nebraska's middles were not that effective. They were both pretty high error. It's not often you see Annie Jackson hit below 300 in a match. Well, she got blocked a few times. I think Wisconsin was camping out on them. It was balanced enough that Nebraska had enough offense to put them away.
Yeah, she was getting double blockers, especially on that slide attack. She was the real focal point of the Wisconsin defense. And I think you may see a lot of teams try to do that, take that Andy Jackson slide away. A lot of teams don't have the personnel or height to do that, but Wisconsin did, and I think that was their game plan from what I saw to take away Andy Jackson.
I think Andy's still learning to be disciplined on some of those slide swings. Like, you can't pull the ball down into a Wisconsin block and hit through it. You're better off going high hands, trying to tool, or even tipping over it sometimes. I think that can be effective too. But Nebraska wins this one. You want to get into the sort of the breakdown of each set?
Yeah, let's do
the most surprising number I saw in this. I went back and rewatched it again last night. Was Nebraska had 6 blocks, I guess officially. It was 6.5 for a while. They called some point not a block that I felt like totally was a block.
They blocked Franklin, and then Booth, in trying to cover it, swung up into the net. So she got called for it. It should have been a block.
Yeah,
I remember
a block in all but a technicality.
The block gave Nebraska a point on that. So, yes.
But so Nebraska's block was a force in game one. Huskers, we'll say they affected 7 points with their block. But it was still tied at 15 when Nebraska puts their foot on the gas and wins 6 of the next 8 rallies. Kennedy Orr had some really good serving in this. Nebraska didn't have a ton of aces, but they served really effectively on this. And again, that goes back to their decision to target Lola Schumacher and just try to get Wisconsin out of system. But Nebraska, this is one of the places it showed up, was late in game one. They won the serve and pass game. Charlie Fierbringer, Wisconsin's freshman setter, has a service error, serves into the net. And then Lexi Rodriguez gets an ace. Nebraska's up 23-18. And for all intents and purposes, game one is done at that point.
Yeah, this goes back to, you mentioned the late runs that Nebraska have. When Nebraska was 21 to, or it was 19-17, Nebraska won 4 of the next 5 points. That again shows that the set was there for the taking, and Nebraska took it. And that's, Rodriguez had an ace during that. Lanfear had a big swing. So, yeah. So, and that was the last block, one of the blocks on Franklin as well too. So it just, Nebraska did a good job of closing that set and taking advantage of that too. And it kind of carried over to the second set too. Nebraska, there's a lot of side out. Nebraska took control with a 7-1 run to go up 12-7. And then, this was I think we have to know that Furbringer kind of really struggled. They had,
she had some low sets to Smrek and some tight sets.
Well, of those 7 points, 5 of them were basically given to her. 4 were on hitting errors, and then she had a set to nobody. So, it was not a good stretch for Wisconsin too. But again, Nebraska took advantage of it. Wisconsin called timeout, regrouped a little bit too, and then that's when they went on their big run, 9-1. They with 4 run. Smrek hit an error long, and then they come back with Gulse Gutkin. Guchkin, thank you. Guchkin, and she served a 5-0 run too. So that puts up Wisconsin 17-14 at that. And this is kind of where Taylor Landfair really took over and really kind of exerted herself. And she was just starting in the front row, and she really flexed herself in this set.
Wisconsin had every opportunity to win game 2 and even this match. They led 19-16, but Landfair gets a kill that starts a 4-0 run to put Nebraska on top 20-19. Then, Landfair, not standing prosperity, has back-to-back errors. Wisconsin goes up 21-20. But then Olivia Mauk goes back to the service line. And this was one of the more impressive parts of Mauk's game on Friday, was not just how she was able to handle serve, receive, and pass, but she served really tough. Nebraska goes on a 4-0 run with the freshman from Bennington serving to go up 24-21. And then once again, it's Merritt Beeson on set point to put it away and give Nebraska a 2-0 lead.
Yeah. The other key point is, Taylor Landfair did have back-to-back errors to put Wisconsin in front too, but Bergen Riley trusted her enough to go back to her again, and she's on the right side in that rotation, because Beeson starts on the left, stays on the left pin, she's on the right pin, but Riley went back to her and did good on the right pin, and it came up with a kill to tie it at 21. So I think the trust that Bergen has in Taylor and the way Taylor was playing, I think to go back to her was a big moment for Landfair, and she delivered to send Olivia back to the service line. That really kind of changed the complexion of the match. And great job. She also, we talked about the atmosphere earlier. Olivia Mauk started the match from the service line too. That's a lot of trust to, hey, welcome to Wisconsin. first match
Yeah.
here, your college career, go start us off with a serve.
I was going to bring that up. They have started sets now with Mauk serving instead of rotation 1 with Bergen Riley serving. They did it again on Sunday against Northwestern. Do you remember when they started doing that?
They do it occasionally. They always start. I mean, it's one. They start that Mauk serves on rotation 2, so it's just a shift of 1. But sometimes when they're in serve receive, they will start in that same rotation. So when the Nebraska gets a side out, Mauk will be the first one to serve. So I don't know if they wanted the matchups or that they liked having Olivia back there, but so they've done it occasionally, but not with any regularity.
I'm just so used to seeing Bergen Riley start sets from the service line in rotation 1 that it threw me when I noticed that Mauk was the one back there serving.
Yeah.
Let's talk about Bergen Riley for a second. I thought this was a really good Bergen Riley match, even though Nebraska hits like, what is it, 202 for the match? It's something low in the low 200s. But against Wisconsin, that's like hitting 315 against a mid-tier team in the Big Ten. I thought her serves were on point. She was, again, they love to be balanced. It was sort of polar opposite from how Wisconsin was live or die with Sarah Franklin. Nebraska spread the ball out. I don't think anyone had more than like 30 swings. So this was a really good Bergen Riley match, I thought.
Yeah, I agree too. I mean, and she really felt out that, I mean, that's what we talked to Kelly Sheffield after the match too. And he said Nebraska is just so balanced that it's hard to develop a game plan because unlike Wisconsin, who is very Sarah Franklin dependent, Nebraska spreads it out so much. And she, again, like I think that Landfair's example is a good example of trusting the hot hand. You make a mistake, you're not in Bergen's doghouse. She'll go back to you and give you something that you can do something with.
Mm-hmm. So Nebraska jumps out to another big lead in game 3. Huskers up 7-2 at the start. They're serving that zone 1 again, Lola Schumacher. But once again, Wisconsin doesn't lay down. They counter with an 8-2 run. They go up 10-9, and then Lincoln, everything just kind of stayed tight there until the end.
Yeah, there's lots of side outs back and forth too. I think again, I mean, Wisconsin was leading 15-14, and Nebraska went. To me, this is another exemplifies what Nebraska was able to do. They ran a 4-0 run, including 3 Wisconsin errors. And the first one I think it was the first one, maybe it was the first or second point of that run. The Nebraska block stuffed Julia Orzel 3 straight times. They covered them all.
Yeah.
But just to frustrate her 3 straight times, and then CeCe Crawford tried to just get something and tipped it, and it went. She tipped
it wide. Yeah.
I mean, that was just. We talked about the block was 10-9, but Nebraska got their hands on a lot of Wisconsin attacks and made the jobs a lot easier for the back row defense too. So I would again. It'd be great to have a volleyball metrics account so we can tell you how many touches they got on the block, which really helped their defense too. I think that means they won the blocking advantage, but they're blocked it a lot more than just getting points.
So Nebraska went up 20-19 on Taylor Landfair's final kill, and then Rebecca Alec and Merrick Beeson blocked Anna Smrek, which never is not hilarious when you realize that Smrek's 6'9". I probably didn't get a great set there, but so Nebraska up 21-19. Beeson had another kill to put Nebraska up 23-19.
Yes.
It was a 5 run to end it with Olivia Mauk once again back at the serving line, and the match ended on hitting errors by Sarah Franklin and Anna Smrek, who both I think just hit wide, trying to avoid that Nebraska block.
Right. You mentioned the Smrek getting blocked too. I think hopefully go online, go to TikTok or go to Instagram, whatever. One of my favorite clips is after Harper Murray completely roofed Anna Smrek. She gave a little extended look back at her too. So I mean, and then Mary Beeson had to grab her and tell her. There's one point, great play. Let's get on to the next one too. But enjoy that moment of blocking that 6'9" player just a little bit too, but move on to the next point pretty quick. That was a fun moment for Harper.
So that ran Nebraska's winning streak to 18 matches. We again snaps Wisconsin's 25-match home winning streak. Wisconsin's first sweep loss at home since 2016, and Nebraska holds Wisconsin to 094 hitting, which is their lowest hitting percentage since 2016. A great win by Nebraska, and it keeps Nebraska undefeated in the Big Ten and neck and neck with Penn State, who they're going to play in a couple weeks.
Yeah, we don't have this in the show notes, but one of the things that I think this does, I mean, you never hate to look forward, but I think, they have like probability. This raises Nebraska's probability of hosting the regional round significantly. Because you look at the danger matches Nebraska lose, and if they lose, if they lose to Oregon or Minnesota, Minnesota or Penn State's probably the toughest 3 matches they have on the schedule left. If they lose,
Wisconsin again.
Yeah, and Wisconsin again. They lose 2 of those. I still think the way that the chaos is happening, that Nebraska has to like where they're lining up to host that second weekend. But
Nebraska and Pitt not only are right now, I would say clearly the 2 best teams in the country. Although I would hear an argument for Penn State to be in a top 3 cluster there. Nobody's got a better resume than Nebraska right now. If you've got wins over, Creighton, Stanford, Louisville, and Wisconsin are all top 10 RPI teams, and you've got a couple of those on the road. I don't know if the RPI takes into account road matches like that, but those are some big time wins. And so it does. You're right. It gives Nebraska a cushion that, say they lose 2, even 3 matches in the final month of the season, that would put them somewhere in the neighborhood of like 27-4 going into the NCAA tournament. And with that resume, like, they are going to host a regional. They're going to be a top 4 seed, unless like the wheels really fall off in a way that I don't think people expect.
Yeah. So that was my last takeaway. So I think it sets, they get a win against Wisconsin on the road should do a lot for Nebraska. I mean, it may not matter in the RPI, but it matters to the committee when they're looking at that and evaluating the teams that they're trying to pick for those top 4 spots. So So great win over Wisconsin. Let's move to rotation 2. Nebraska took care of business. I think I just finished my story a little bit ago, as Sunday afternoon as we record this, and my lead to that was observation by John Baylor made this as well too, that it was sold out crowd, 6,003 fans, program record for Northwestern. The fans, because it was all general admission, spent more time waiting outside for the match than they did actually watching volleyball. So
this was an 85-minute match, maybe a 90-minute match.
81-minute match officially by the scorebook. So
Nebraska sweeps Northwestern 25-18 and then 15-15. This match kind of went the way that I thought it would, in that I feel like Nebraska never just on all cylinders when they go to Evanston. They were a little sloppy. They were not, this was not champagne volleyball, but they out hit Northwestern 287 to 082. They served 7 aces and they outblocked Northwestern 7-2. So, even though you look at some of the play in the match, you're like, that's not great. I mean, Northwestern didn't reach 20 points in any set. And Nebraska rolls. Big night again, or afternoon, from Merritt Beeson. 9 kills without an error on 14 swings. Andy Jackson looking more like herself, 8 kills and hit 545. And Nebraska just never was really threatened in this match.
Yeah. The other key takeaway for this is too, Lexi Rodriguez got 7 digs. She tied Kayla Banworth. She's now number 2 all time on Nebraska's dig list. They have 1,706. Justine Wong-Arantes is at the top of that at 1890, which they need to do. They need to have a tie with her with the 1890 initiative. I think that's a very football number too, but get some JWO in there, get some 1890 NLI collective stuff for that. But Lexi will break.
Justine is now a pro. She gets paid for actually playing volleyball, and
use her for advertising. Yeah,
somebody should do endorsements with Justine, because she'd just be awesome at it. But Lexi Rodriguez, brought some excitement to the match with that. So on her next dig, she will move into number 2 by herself on the all-time dig list. Nebraska's best set offensively was actually game 1. They hit 306. Beeson had 5 of her 9 kills in the opener. Nothing real. There's not a lot to add in this match. I thought Northwestern You see this a lot where Northwestern will look pretty pedestrian against a team like Michigan State or Indiana, and then they'll come out and they'll like play with no fear in game one against Nebraska and kind of frustrate Nebraska. Buse Hazan is Northwestern's leading attacker, and I thought she swung really aggressively in game one. They were tooling Nebraska's block. They were beating the block with some quick sets. But, again, Nebraska not really threatened in game one, winning it 25-18.
Yeah, both the first set and the second set, the closest Nebraska got challenged, up 15-12 in both of them. And then in the first set went on a 7-1 run, and the second set scored 4 points in a row too. So it was tight early, but it never really felt like Nebraska was out of control. In the second set, they went on a 9-3 run. And then Northwestern hit negative that set with 7 kills, 8 errors. The other strength that I think a takeaway from this is Nebraska serving once again looked really good. Finished with 7 aces, 5 errors. Harper Murray had 3 aces. So while she really struggled with the attack, I think she had 4 kills. Really did good work from the service line too.
And Nebraska got to show off a little depth in game 3. Layla Blackwell replaced Rebecca Alec in the middle, played all of the third set and had 3 kills. Lindsey Krause came in about midway through game 3, if I remember right, for Taylor Landfair, who was kind of struggling on Sunday. She had 6 kills and 4 errors on 20 swings. That's a 100 hitting percentage. And, this is a team you think someone like Landfair with her talent would just feast on. And it didn't quite come to pass against Northwestern. But, no harm, no foul for the Huskers as they sweep Northwestern. Now they've won 19 straight matches heading into Nebraska has to play the first 2 weekends of November on the road, and they're going in opposite directions. I think we're going to break this down here in a bit on the show, but this is a sneaky tough road trip. Oregon is a very good team that has some really high level players. And then Washington, when they're on, can really challenge you as well. And this is going to be Nebraska's first trip up to the Pacific Northwest since those newcomers joined the Big Ten.
Yeah, so it's a little bit maybe out of their comfort zone too. I mean, the first time that they're experiencing the hotels in Eugene and Seattle. So it's a new experience for everyone on the team. So it'll be a challenge, but Nebraska's 12-0 in the Big Ten and still sitting out on top of the league and doing well. So let's move on to rotation 3. We talk with Chad Gordon, who is a stats guru with Volleyball Dork is kind of his handle that he goes by. So great conversation we had with him. Gets a lot into the weeds with stats, which is great. Sometimes you just crunch the numbers, help you understand what you feel may be happening and what your eyes are telling you. The analytics kind of help with that.
Yeah, exactly. And I think I'm so glad that we've talked about bringing Chad on for a long time because, there are a lot of people who watch volleyball and, their eyes can tell them when ball goes boom, but like 9 other things needed to happen to lead up to that moment. And some players are hard to quantify how valuable they are to a team, especially in the back row. You'll hear us talk about Olivia Mauk and Lainey Choboy, players who really were pivotal in that big win against Wisconsin. But in the stat sheet, all you see is the number of serves they handled, or maybe the number of digs they had. And Chad Gordon and what he's trying to do is sort of make a little bit more mainstream some of those advanced stats in volleyball in the same way that there's been a revolution in football and basketball and baseball to kind of quantify why a player is good or why something worked. Chad's part of the team that's trying to do that again for volleyball. So we're really excited to talk today with Chad Gordon of volleyballdork.com.
All right, and we move on to our next rotation. We are joined by Chad Gordon, also known as Volley Dork. You may have seen all of his charts, all of his rankings, his statistical analysis on social media. So we are very glad to be joined by him to talk about why he does what he does and what can we learn from all this stats. So, Chad, thanks for joining us today.
Lincoln, Jeff. Thanks guys for having me on. I appreciate it.
Chad, your family and close friends also call you Volley Dork, or is that just an online nom de guerre?
Yeah, I'd like to just say it's more the pen name than anything else. But I'm at the point now where I'll be at lunch with somebody, like especially when we go to the ABCA convention, coming up
Mhm.
here in a month or two, and they're talking to me. Oh, this is Chad. It's no problem. It's not weird at all. And then my buddy's like, he's Volley Dork, and I'm like,
Oh, oh.
this is embarrassing, and I guess in the best sense, but yeah, it's all good. It's all good. We're having
You
fun.
got to
So
embrace it.
Yes.
I'm doing my best to lean into it. It's just I feel like there are better nicknames, but
Yeah.
I'll take what I can get. All
Well-
press is good press. I don't know.
We'll take it. We'll take it. Yeah. Tells me this is a very niche thing to get into. I mean, how did you get into this? What's your background? Is this something that you've always been interested in numbers and statistical analysis, or how did this kind of all start?
Yeah, I mean a little bit, but honestly, I'm a coach here in San Jose. I coach for Beta Bay Volleyball Club on the boys side of the house, and before that, I've finished my undergrad at UC Santa Barbara, and I basically just emailed a bunch of programs trying to be the volunteer assistant. And Kevin Hambley at Illinois was one of the people that got back to me, and went out to Illinois for 2 years, got my master's there. And he's probably the one who really like pushed a lot of the stuff. Like if
Mhm.
you've ever gotten a chance to talk with Hambley, like he's a pretty analytical thinker.
Oh yeah.
And he had a couple questions that we couldn't answer. Like we were using data volley back then, and there wasn't a lot of nuance to the stats. And so he had a couple questions that were just like, hey, like how tough should we be serving? How are we playing out of system, and these things that needed a little bit deeper dive. And I got into some of this coding stuff, right? So a lot of this is written in a programming language called R. And then yeah, just recently I've I don't know, been posting more stuff. I've had a blog for a little bit. And then people seem to like this stuff, and honestly it was last year Dustin Watton reached out, and he was like, hey man, like I'd love to like collaborate on some of these things. Would you like to post more? And here are some of the questions I have. I work with Lexi. Obviously you guys are familiar.
Mhm.
And it kind of just snowballed where it was like, oh, like Dustin wants more of this stuff. Great. Sure, I got time. I can put out some more of this stuff. And so we've just been kind of hacking away at it for the past few years, and then it's kind of crescendoed a little bit over the last year or so.
Chad, before we go too much further, tell our listeners all the places they can kind of find your analytics. You mentioned a website. You post a lot on social media. Give yourself a little plug here. Where can people find all of the numbers and the analysis you put out?
Yeah, I think on Instagram the handle is volley.dork. On Twitter, I think it's still under my name. I think it's Chad Gordon 09 is that handle. And then the blog, which I don't post nearly as often as I used to, but it's at volleydork.com. And it's more like when we get to like year-end stuff, like All America type of honors and whatnot, I'll put up something a little bit more written out. But right now it's just posting some stuff on Twitter, on Instagram, and all that.
Great. I think, one of the reasons that Lincoln and I even started this show once upon a time was to help people understand volleyball beyond just a very surface ball goes boom level. And when, neither of us had a background in volleyball when we started covering the sport, and it took a while, like years, to kind of understand the motivations and the strategy behind it. And like, we're not coaches, we still don't understand all of it, but what we do know is like there's things a box score can tell you, and then there's a whole lot of other things that are important to the sport that a box score can't tell you. In your analysis of this, are there things that you feel like are giant misunderstandings, or what's the biggest thing that average fans might misunderstand about the sport of volleyball that you feel like you can bring a better understanding to?
Yeah, I get this question pretty often actually, and I think there's just a lot happening under the surface, right? So, imagine you're watching NBA, games or something like that, and you're like, wow, like Steph Curry's a great shooter. And it's like, yeah, he is, but it's where he's taking these shots, and it's these valuable baskets that he's kind of stringing together here. Volleyball's kind of the same, right? Like when you get a free ball, you kind of have this expectation of what's going to happen, and most players perform very well in these controlled situations. But if you're looking at some of the best of the best, right? If you're looking at Olivia Babcock right now, is obviously having a great year for Pitt again. She's doing her job on the easy stuff, but she's also a monster out of system, as a blocker. When she's not getting stuff blocked, she's slowing people down. So there's I think there's just a lot of nuance there, I think a lot of focus is on attacking, but people miss the fact that like only 1 out of 2 attacks are terminal, right?
Mhm.
50% of the stuff, the ball continues, and how you play those balls and whether you're creating good situations or bad, that has a huge kind of likelihood or a huge effect on the likelihood to win the rally, right? I could tip it to the libero, or I could smash it at Bergen Riley, and I could force Lexi to play high. Like those are drastically different things. And some players do a really good job of making great decisions over and over and over, and others don't. And so I think that's one of the aspects I really like about kind of digging into that next step on the stats.
Yeah. There's a lot of different stats. I mean, attacking numbers, dig numbers, where you attack. I mean, I think a lot of people, is there a silver bullet that for stat analysis that you can point to and like, maybe not like explains a lot, but what stat do you think is the most impactful towards winning?
If you're looking at just who probably won the set, it's your hitting efficiency minus your opponent's. Like that differential is usually the best thing you can look at to kind of look to tell a story, to your point of who won. It doesn't always carry over through the match. It often does, but if you're looking at a set level thing, because you could win 25-23 and then you could lose 15-25, like, and you might have even numbers in the match. But that's probably the biggest thing that people could look at of easily accessible statistics. See how you're hitting and subtract out how they're hitting, and the bigger that delta, the more comfortable you should feel probably about your team.
Yeah, we're still trying to figure out how Nebraska beat Purdue in that fifth set, where Purdue hit 481, and Nebraska hit 458. So that's hitting percentage, I guess. But yeah, it's so sometimes it's weird numbers pop up on that.
Oh yeah, especially you get into a game to 15, right? It's small sample size, and these things just start rolling. Missed serve, nets, challenge overruled, momentum's going one way, and yeah, those are always exciting. And I'm pretty sure Nebraska hasn't played a 5-setter since that. So you guys have pretty much just been rolling everybody. That seems like the safer strategy. So nice job there.
Chad, you've come up with, well, I don't know if you came up with it even, but you talk a lot about EPA, expected points added, which is not a stat that I have really heard of until recently. Is that a metric that you came up with? How did you come up with it? And what exactly can it tell people? Because to me, it kind of seems like the volleyball equivalent of wins above replacement in baseball, which is maybe the most a prominent example of advanced statistics that people now have worked into the discourse.
Yeah, I think it's heavily influenced by other sports. Volleyball kind of lags behind statistically, and whether it's WAR or some kind of expected value, expected points. We've had some great people in the sport, work on this stuff, right? Joe Trinzi, Nate Go. There's a lot of smart folks, doing good work. So I don't want to say like I'm acting in a vacuum or anything like that, but at least this version of expected points is something that I built, and it really is just a way to add more color to the touches that are happening on the court, right? Taking into account the situation in front of you, behind you, the strength of your opponent that you're going against, and then using a lot of historical data, right? Taking all the matches that have happened this year to really make sure that, hey man, on this perfect pass, Harper Murray's got she's expected to hit about 400 or 450, if she's perfectly in system. Every time she kills it, she gets a little bit of love on top of that. But if you make an error on that situation, right, we deduct appropriately. And it's not perfect. There are plenty of flaws, and you could poke holes in it, and I'm the first to admit that. But when you see some of the best players at the top of the list, I was listening to a quote from, I think it's Bill James or Billy Bean or something like that. But it's 80. If you come up with a new metric and 80% of it kind of aligns with what coaches and players and people like, it kind of passes the smell test, and then it tells you about 20% new information, then you're doing okay. Mm-hmm. And with EPA, I feel like I've kind of balanced that, where it's like, oh, a lot of these players are who you'd expect, right? Lexi Rodriguez does it very well, right? But then, there's some new folks, right? You have your freshman Olivia, who's having a monster start to her career as a Husker. Elena Scott, Elena Ogilvy, like all these great players, it's it just kind of helps balance the field a little bit.
There's so many movements and touches and I guess behaviors that happen in a volleyball match over the course of all these rallies. Tell us a little bit, to the extent you can, about your process on how all these get tracked and accounted for to be put into metrics. Do you have a software that does it? Does everything have to be charted individually? It feels like you would never sleep if you had to do it manually, but how does this work?
Yeah, I mean it's funny. So we use Huddle's data for this, right? So if you guys are familiar with volumetrics, I'm getting data from that, and then you get into this like row by row of every single touch that happens, and then it's it's a couple thousand lines of code that I've written out in a few scripts to get that data in, and then hey, look, like not all attacks are the same, right? Some of them happen against a triple block and the setter was 45 feet away and she slung it up there and somehow Taylor Landfair smoked it down the line, right? Yeah. Like that's one thing versus like, no, Harper Murray was gifted an overpass and she just boom, little fist and she scored. Well, like we don't expect the same thing based on those two situations. So all of that is just written into the code. And so yeah, so each week, at least on my side, you get all these matches. It takes like an hour or two to kind of run through everything and applies all this logic, all these pretty simple like regression models and stuff. It's not like crazy advanced statistics, but we're gonna be working towards something a little bit higher end. I'm joining the Volley Station crew. And we're building a AI and computer vision for them. And then when you get into like player tracking and event data and all that kind of stuff, you have a lot more color on, hey, that kill was actually crazy because you found the only open part of the court, or you hit it at such a pace that, yeah, you hit it right at Lexi, but even she couldn't handle it. Like you get into like you open a whole new world when you add in all that new data.
For sure. Yeah. We're Jeff and I are talking to you. We're about a mile or so away from the Huddle headquarters. So we're very familiar with that. So hopefully they want to give us any access to volumetrics. We did love to join the data crowd. So
yeah, I know. I mean, like, don't get me wrong. Like I've known Giuseppe who started volumetrics for a long time, and he has done pioneering work. Like it has been evolutionary in our sport over the past 10 years or so. And yeah, it's like without volumetrics, right? Like basically none of this would be possible. So they get a ton of credit, and obviously being a company in Lincoln is massive.
You like him.
Yeah.
We are talking with Chad Gordon, also known as Volley Dork. So you mentioned kind of a little bit when your eyes maybe aren't telling you the same thing the numbers are. Do you ever tweak your formulas, or is there give and take, or do you kind of figure out how do you develop those formulas when you're putting them together, and do you go about adjusting them as time goes on?
There isn't really any adjustment to the underlying formulas. There probably was when I was building a lot of this stuff of just, like what's the best way to determine, I don't know, like an attack expectation, right? Yeah. Well, it's like, I got a lot of influence from Nate actually on this with the USA men's team, where, hey, was the middle on a route, right? Is like, that's some of the data you have is kind of like, is the middle an option? But then after that, it's, how far is the setter from kind of like an ideal situation? How many blockers is that person facing? Is this kind of a slow ball? Is it a high ball? What are we really dealing with? And that's about all the data we have right now. Like we don't have the ability to dive too much deeper. We're just kind of limited with the granularity that we have. But yeah, I mean, it was an iterative process to kind of see like, okay, hold on, like I don't know that this feature in the model really matters that much. Let's just go ahead and rip that out. Let's change something else. And then you kind of work through some of this, like what you would call like feature engineering, to figure out what exactly should be in these models so that you get results that make sense, right? And part of that is just like, you got to just be a volleyball person, and then you have a pretty good sense of, what should be included, what shouldn't be, what does kind of, again, pass the eye test for you.
You mentioned Nate a couple times, and for our listeners who haven't been familiar with Nebraska volleyball for a long, long time, Nate Go originally was a volunteer assistant and kind of the first person for Nebraska. He was a volunteer assistant for Nebraska before moving up to the Pacific Northwest and eventually taking some jobs with USA Volleyball and kind of bringing advanced statistical analysis to that program. And as far as I could tell, Nate was one of the first people in the college game to, have these video breakdowns, and John Cook would always speak very highly of him. So it's kind of cool to see this come full circle that, Nate's someone that's influenced a lot of the work that you've done. He's still one of the brighter minds that I've ever come across within the sport. And even if this is not one of our most highest listened to episodes, I feel like if Nate listens to this episode, I will consider it a success. So Nate, you better be listening to this one.
I got off a call with him like 6 minutes ago. I'll send it to him when we're done. Problem solved.
Excellent. Yeah. Thanks. Chad, one of the things that jumped out to us last year in looking at some of your numbers, it really highlighted how good of a back row attack Nebraska had. And we spent a lot of time talking about Nebraska and Mara Beeson and Harper Murray. This year, I think a lot of your numbers show that the passing numbers for Nebraska are really good, with Olivia Mauk kind of being an unsung standout as far their passing foundation goes. Are there numbers that you see with Nebraska this year that really jump out to you that illustrates what the strength of their team is this year?
Yeah, it certainly seems a little bit more balanced in some ways, attacking. I don't know if that's Taylor Landfair coming in and playing a little bit bigger role. But yeah, your guys' backcourt is always top notch, right? I mean, I'm just looking at numbers just in reception, right? Lexi's up there, then Laney, Harper's up there. I mean, obviously Olivia's on the podium. Like that's just the bread and butter of Nebraska volleyball. I mean, it kind of always has been, right? That serve and pass game. It is a little interesting, right? I think we've seen a little bit less of Beeson out of the back row this year than previously. I don't know if that's, hey, we're not asking her to pass as much, or we'd rather get up to our big kids in the front, or whatever that may be. But every time I'm looking at numbers, it's usually like, oh yeah, there's Nebraska just being super balanced again. They're great in reception and they're super balanced. Oh, cool. That's awesome. So I think the only thing that you could probably tease out a little bit more though, right? Andy Jackson and Becca Alec, like in the middle, they're kind of like a little bit different of what they're being asked to do. I caught a clip. Man, I don't know what match this was. I think they were playing Illinois or something like that. Go Illini. But it's Andy Jackson's like out there bouncing balls, and then Alec is just like, I'm gonna touch this, I'm gonna be over here, I'm just reading and touching everything, right? Yeah. She's not like, I'm gonna get 20 kills a night. But this is one of those things, guys, like when you talk about what kind of metrics are interesting, but like maybe like the general public like doesn't pay attention to, or like doesn't give the right credibility for, players like Becca Alec, who are not stuff blocking a ton of people but are touching a ton of balls. It's so important. Like your ability to slow down these offenses, especially when you're playing top 10 teams, like Pitt's leading in what, hitting percentage and opponent hitting percentage. It's ludicrous, right? And so you need these players that just read the game so well, and they have this touch. We had a kid at Illinois, Ali Bastianelli, who's now I think playing for like the San Diego Mojo or something. I don't know where Ali B is. But you have like they have this natural ability. Like when the ball hits them, good things just happen. And if you're just looking at, hey, how many blocks did you have? You don't really get that. But it's actually a huge impact. And then it makes that excellent backcourt look even better, right? Because now they're dealing with easier, slower balls off the block or whatever it is. You can be in system much more. So
we see so many people talk about serving as kind of a binary success metric. They talk about aces and errors all the time. They're like, oh, this is the best serving team in the conference. They lead the conference in aces, and we're trying to drill into them. It's like, that's not the most effective measure of who's a good serving team. It's how often you're getting a team out of system, or what's the likelihood you force a bad pass. Like that's really the metric of what a good serving team is. Aces and errors are part of it, but there's a reason why team programs continue to serve super aggressive and will just eat the errors if they feel like they're getting something on the other side of the ledger that just might not show up in the box score.
Yeah, I think that's like, again, it's a really astute observation, right? That most people, the data you have, right, is
Hmm.
aces and airs. So that's kind of what you gravitate towards. Um, and I think on the men's side, it makes a little bit more sense because there are just more aces and airs, more people are hitting jump spin, and so you see that a lot. But yeah, I mean, if I was going to look at something like looking at maybe like your opponent's good pass, rate or something like that versus your errors, or I know other people call it like a knockout percentage or something like
Mhm.
this of getting people out of system is massive, right? And if you can be really great defending high balls, boom, you're in the money. So I would encourage folks. I mean, I get like Nebraska's not going to miss that many serves, but if you're watching like Stanford's probably the most notable high air serving team right now.
Yeah.
And Kevin's philosophy, right, is really just borrowed from the men of like, if we don't get them off the net, we're going to be in trouble. So we might as well take cracks at it.
Hmm.
And that's fine. We'll live with those errors because in the aggregate, we're going to get them in enough trouble to make this worth it. And I think where most people kind of conflate these two things is um, looking at like end of set, like win probabilities, right? Like if you're missing a bunch of serves and it's 15 all, doesn't really matter, right? But then you see it, man, was it, I think Stanford played SMU, whatever, a couple of weeks ago,
Yeah.
and they get late in this game, and it's like, oh, miss serve, bummer, match point other way. Oh, miss serve, match point the other
Yeah.
way. It's like, what are you doing? Just
You don't want to
take
miss
it
a
in,
serve at 23-23.
Yeah.
just kick it over the net. Like
Yeah.
they have a front row setter. Like this is, man, rotation 4. They're in their worst possible position. Just punt it. Just punt it to them.
Yeah.
And so this is where I think fans are totally in the right is like, hey, end of set. Look, if you have some kids serving into a really strong rotation, right? Hey, I'm serving into Nebraska rotation 2 or 3, right? All the top hitters, everybody's up there. Bergen's in the back row. Okay, you got to take a crack at it because they're really going to do a good job siding out. But if you can get Nebraska maybe into like rotation 6, where Andy Jackson is just checked out, they probably aren't going to set Alec that much. They got kind of one-on-one with the outside. Dude, it's 24 all. Kick it over the net. Like,
Yeah.
and yeah, as you can tell, as I start to ramble, I have some feelings
No. Yeah.
about this, and this is where I think the regular fan audience that isn't super data driven is 100% right. Of just like, what are you doing? Like, put it in place. Stop.
Yeah, that Stanford SMU. I think Stanford had 22, 23 errors, and SMU had 15, and it was a sweep. So weird things happened. So the other thing that I kind of look at your numbers this year is just I wrote an article for my email list is that how good Pitt is. I mean, Pitt, their players are all the top 3 positionally, and just a lot of the team metrics they're up there too. I mean, how are you surprised by how good? I mean, they're number 1 in the nation, but how dominant are they statistically?
Are you looking for an answer besides very? I mean, like that's they've just played really well.
Yeah.
And I think you got to give a lot of credit to that staff and Fisher and these guys. Like they've done an excellent job training these younger players because there are balls that I'm seeing Torrey Stafford hit high ball, a little bit inside, gets her feet there, and looks like Maddie Skinner, right? And she's not some 5th-year grad transfer or whatever. Like she's doing a really good job with her feet, with her eyes, with her wrist. She's creating excellent swings that we're seeing from the likes of Sarah Franklin or something like that. But now that you've got 2 or 3 of those players on the pins, so even when you get them in trouble, they're still not really in trouble. And when you don't get them in trouble, like their middles have just been lighting people up. And they don't set them a ton, but like when they do, they score. So I don't know. I really liked what SMU's Sam Erger was talking about of just like we don't tip. We're not tipping against these guys. We're smoking every single ball because that's the only way that we have a chance. Because the second that these guys are in any kind of like even medium system, not even like perfect, but like just medium, they're still really good, right? And it's you really got to pressure these guys to force them to have an off night, and we'll see if they can keep that run going. I mean,
we're wrapping up here with Chad Gordon of volleydork.com. Chad, as you kind of put out more of your statistical analysis, there was one number or one stat that we could add to the box score in every volleyball match to help people better understand the things that happened in the match, and you could wave your magic wand, what exactly would that be?
Oh man. Shoot, that's a good question. Man.
If it was us, I think Lincoln and I are both of the opinion something having to do with serving and passing that would be beyond aces and errors. If you could put passing numbers on there, like on your scale of 0 to 3, or bad, good and bad pass percentage, however you wanted to display it. I know you've put that out before, but passing is just such a misunderstood part of the sport, I feel like, and it's one of the most important. So it kind of blows my mind we haven't found a way to put that out there. But this is also a sport that like has really struggled, I feel like, to define itself statistically for years and years.
Yeah, I mean it hasn't really advanced that much since like Jim Coleman came up with a bunch of this stuff, along before my time. I think if you had aces, errors, and maybe like good pass, right, which volumetrics does provide, I think that would get you a little bit more color on this stuff, and it would allow folks to understand like, hey, look, like they're missing, but opponent good pass is really low when XYZ player goes back to serve. I think that'd be super helpful. I would love something about these non-terminal attacks, right? There's just an iceberg under the water of stuff that people don't see. And the best players in the game, they create a ton of value on non-terminal balls. And they don't make the mistake of playing easy balls to the best defensive player on the floor. Like, so if we could have some color on that, I think that'd be really interesting.
Awesome. Yeah, I definitely agree. Passing numbers would be one of my that I would like to see on a box score. Just like Jeff said, it illustrates so much more and does that. So there's a lot of room for improvement. So, well, cool.
Slow and steady.
Yes, we'll wait. Well, hopefully people have gained a little bit of insight hearing from you, Chad. So thanks for joining us today. They can find your work on Instagram, on Twitter. Get ready for some blog posts next month once the tournament kicks up. So Chad Gordon, Volleyball Dork, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me, guys. A lot of fun.
All right, moving on to rotation 4, our look at the week that was in Big Ten volleyball. Penn State stayed neck and neck with Nebraska at the top of the Big Ten standings. They had a big win on Wednesday. Penn State is ranked number 3 this week. They dominate Michigan in a way that Nebraska wasn't able to do when the Wolverines came to Lincoln. Penn State wins at 25-16, 15, and 17. They out-ace Michigan 7-0. And the Wolverines, again, feast or famine, I guess, for them from the service line. They had 13 service errors and no aces. They hit just 169. And the big blow to Michigan, and we hate to see this, but their great outside hitter, Allison Jacobs, Michigan's leading attacker, left this match with an ankle injury. I have not been able to find any more info on how extensive that is and how long she may be out.
And she did not play Sunday against Minnesota. So it's just serious enough where she missed the next match for them. So you hate to see that because she's a fun player, has a great story. Missed all of last year with a different shoulder injury. So it's it changed the mood and complexion of that match a little bit. And so hopefully she's able to come back and finish her Michigan career on the court at least. So you hate to see that. But Penn State bounced back. They played Iowa this weekend. They did drop a set on Friday, but they still earned a victory, as Penn State should do against Iowa. And now the Big Ten race, we kind of went in depth on that a little bit last week, but Nebraska and Penn State are 2 games clear of the rest of the field. So we got 4 weekends left. They have a direct line to the top of the standings. So.
And those 2 teams, again, play their one match of the season on Black Friday. It's going to be in Happy Valley. Nebraska has to go to Penn State on the Friday after Thanksgiving. So
it's a weird setup, too, where that's Penn State's last match of the year, but Nebraska has to play Maryland the following day.
Yeah, they go to Maryland the next day.
Weird.
All right. Yeah. Otherwhere in can't talk. Elsewhere in the Big Ten, Washington knocks off number 10 Oregon 15-10 in the fifth set. This is the second five-setter that these two teams have played this year. Each of them won. Each of the home team won both of the matches in the fifth set. If you remember a couple weeks ago up in Eugene, Washington had a big lead in the fifth set. I want to say they led like 10-5 in game 5 before Oregon came back and won the match. Washington holds on this time and knocks off Oregon. That's their best win of the year. Washington hits 325, led by 20 kills from Kirsten Barton, who actually left the match with an injury, with Washington up 11-7 in the fifth set. But she came back and she played in their second match of the. Let's see, did she play today? Do we know that yet?
She is not listed in the box score. They're currently playing right now. She is not playing on Sunday against USC.
Well, something to keep an eye on then for this week. Nebraska plays Washington, but Washington holds on and wins it in the fifth. Hunt and Fletcher both had 12 kills for Washington, and Mimi Collier, the great outside hitter for Oregon, who Nebraska fans are going to see up close on Friday night, had 17 kills and 318 for the Ducks, but Washington holds on and wins that one.
Yeah, and then the rest of the Big Ten action, the teams on the top half of the standings all won. The one match of note, USC swept their crosstown rival UCLA for the first time since 2018. So USC hopefully bounced back. They had that loss against Michigan State that maybe caught them off guard, or just they bounced back from that. Allie Batenhorst, another great match from her, 16 kills. She hit 538, which I believe I'm just going to say
I think she had one error in the match.
Yeah, that was it. So definitely a season high. That might be up with one of her best career. I mean, she may have some limited matches where she didn't play the entire match, but she went off. But 538 is great. And then USC hit 328 for the team. They're currently, as we are playing, USC and Washington are playing Sunday afternoon. USC won the first two sets. Batenhorst does a decent game here going on too. Not a lot of offense in this one. A lot of errors from
a lot of blocks, probably is my guess.
There's some blocks, but yeah, just a lot of errors. Washington had about 16 of them through the first two sets. So,
and then Minnesota swept Michigan in Ann Arbor on Sunday afternoon as well. Nothing super noteworthy from that match. So it was it wasn't a weekend for upsets in the Big Ten. Lots of the favorites won. If you want to call Nebraska over Wisconsin an upset, you can. But go ahead.
No, however, let's go on. Let's talk about some other upsets that are national recaps.
Rotation 5, everywhere else was chaos, baby. The Big Ten went chalk, and everyone else drew on the walls with marker. So let's start Friday. Missouri stuns Texas, who, spoiler alert, had a rough weekend. Number 9 Texas falls at home to Missouri. It's the first time that Texas has lost 3 matches at home in a season since 2006, and that's before what happened on Sunday that we'll talk about here in a minute. Jordan Iliff with 18 kills for Missouri. Michael Vernon had 16. I thought this was really cool. Missouri setter Marina Crownover is from Austin. She was a Texas transfer. She was a backup on the back-to-back national title teams the last couple of years for Texas. She was Missouri's starting setter and had a great match with over 50 assists. Missouri, break up the Tigers. They've won 7 straight. They were tied atop the SEC. And from watching the end of this match, once again, Texas's passing struggles continue. They have really good attackers that are not able to get full swings. Reagan Rutherford had a good match for Texas, but everyone else kind of struggled. Missouri aced Texas 8 times. And, I like Texas's libero too. Emma Halter's, I think, is pretty good. Oh, yeah. But it's like everyone else on Texas that just the passing is not there. And, Texas continues to run the 6-2, I believe, and they're not able to put up big numbers.
They've been, sometimes when they do run a 5-1, they just switch their setters in and out, and there is no consistency or rhyme or reason. So, but then that leads to Sunday's match, Red River shootout against Oklahoma, fellow SEC compatriot. Oklahoma goes into Austin, hands Texas their 4th loss of the year. Oklahoma won 15-9 in the 5th set. The Sooners hit 579 in that 5th set too. 12 kills, 1 error, and 19 swings. Alexis Shelton, 27 kills, 15 digs, hit 365, led the charge for the Sooners. Big win for them. Maddie Skinner hit 17 kills, but only 122. She had 11 errors for the Sooners. The big kind of difference of this one, you look at the box score, is Oklahoma had 16 blocks. Texas had 10, so a little bit of advantage too. The Texas service is a little bit better, only gave up 5 aces. But again,
Texas only hits 187, in a 5-set match, while Oklahoma hits over 100 points better, hits 293. That's incredible. And I admit, I am not familiar with the game of Alexis Shelton, but having 27 kills in a 5-setter at Texas, puts you on quite a few national notoriety lists. We might be looking at an SEC player of the week there. But even the sets that Texas won, let's see, Texas had to squeak out 27-25 win in game 2. They won 25-19 in game 3. But after that, the last 2 sets were not close. Oklahoma just puts the hammer down and wins it. And this is uncertain times in Texas. I am not used to seeing Jarrett Elliott's team kind of not know who they are in early November and dropping 4 matches at home. Texas is playing a lot of 5-setters this year, and they're losing some matches to some teams that are not exactly volleyball powers. When you look at Miami and A&M and now, OU, that's rough.
Well, also it's rough. They lost probably their 2 biggest rivals, Oklahoma and Texas A&M, probably in all sports, not just volleyball, a lot in football. You lose to both Oklahoma and A&M in the same year. It's not a good time in Austin. I mean, I wonder, because Texas had a little bit of struggles last year, but that was all in August and September. They really figured out who they were by the time conference rolled in. This is a November loss for them that you wonder. I mean, Jarrett Elliott has enough of a track record where you don't doubt him, but
they'll figure it out and they'll go into the tournament and everyone will be like, they'll forget it. They'll forget about these early November struggles is my prediction. But
for sure,
Texas, once again, they won the national title. They were a point away from losing in the Sweet 16 to Tennessee last season too. So, any given night, I guess, in the sport this year. Another example of this, Miami, who already has a 5-set win over Texas on their resume, wins at home over number 5 Stanford in 5. I wrote down, this is kind of the opposite of the Nebraska-Wisconsin match. This was not, gritty defensive volleyball. Stanford loses despite hitting 323. Miami also over 300 at 307, but the Hurricanes hit 420 over the final 2 sets, just 4 errors combined in games 4 and 5. Grace Lopez, their great outside hitter, who had 20 kills when Miami beat Texas earlier in the year, hit 407 against Stanford with 27 kills. And Stanford really has to feel like they let this match slip away, because in game 4, which Miami ended up winning 31-29, Stanford had 5 match points at various parts of game 4 and couldn't convert any of them before Miami won game 4 and then on and won game 5.
Yeah, this was all part of a very chaotic Friday night too. I mean, I was in Madison, so my attention was focused there a little bit too. But within these matches seem all end within 10, 15 minutes of each other too. I think we were texting back and forth too. I was like, oh, hey, I was going to start writing my story, Nebraska, Wisconsin story too. And oh, hey, Texas loses, Stanford loses. So there's a lot of chaos going on across the country.
Well, and again, this helps Nebraska's case to be a top 4 seed and host regional, because, right now I have to think 3 of those spots are going to go to one Pitt. 2 of them will come from the Big Ten, probably Penn State, and then either Nebraska or Wisconsin are going to get those other 2. And then that leaves the door open for somebody to grab that spot. Maybe that's Louisville. Maybe that's Creighton. Creighton is on the roll, and they're going to have a good argument for it. And depending on what the committee wants to do, if they really want to make sure a West Coast school is represented, you can always give it to Stanford. But when Stanford's running around losing to SMU and Miami, then that argument becomes a little bit harder to make.
Yeah, you really want those ACC teams to do well, and those classic Atlantic Coast matchups between Stanford and Miami. So you mentioned it there, but Creighton took care of business. They beat St. John's and Villanova, moved to 21-2. They've won 14 straight. Kendra Waite, we talked about last week was a big night or a big week for Kirsten Bernthal Booth. Kendra Waite's record setter this week. She broke Creighton's school record for double doubles. So Yeah, they took care of business against that. They play not Louis. Their last big match of the year. They play Marquette next Sunday, November 10th. That's Marquette's
On the road.
on the road. They're number 2 in the Big East behind Creighton. So that's one of the last ones they have left.
Even if you give Creighton like one loss in the Big East, whether that's in the regular season or the Big East still plays a tournament, which Creighton's going to host, that sends Creighton into the postseason at like 28-3. I'm close on that. I could be off by a couple matches because Creighton right now has only lost 2 matches, and they're to Nebraska and Louisville, I believe. So
5. Yeah, both in 5 too.
Both in 5 and both on the road. So like Creighton's resume is outstanding, and they just kind of keep churning through the Big East.
The one thing that dings them is they don't have any super marquee. I mean, but there are 2 marquee wins. They beat Kansas at Kansas. And they beat Purdue and Lawrence as well too. So you like to have 1 or 2 more. So that's why I think they play Marquette next week, and then they could play Marquette in the Big East. They probably should be rooting for Marquette to make the finals so they can get another high quality win.
Yeah.
So that's Creighton. But Creighton, I think they're rooting for chaos. They want Nebraska or Penn State really to stub their toe a little bit. That would really open the door for them. But they took care of business.
We talked about players who are putting up big numbers. Nobody's putting up bigger numbers lately than Florida's opposite hitter, Kennedy Martin. She's back from injury, and she is murdering volleyball. She had 31 kills on Wednesday night when Florida beat Arkansas in 4. She hit 377 on 61 swings, and that was her second straight match with 31 kills because she put away that many against Tennessee last weekend. So Kennedy Martin is red hot for Mary Wise's Florida Gators.
She did have a slightly off day on Sunday against Ole Miss. She only had 22 kills in 4 sets. So you really hope she gets her act together and gets going again next week. But yeah, she is she's really good and fun to watch. Glad to see her back healthy. Other news: the Big 12. This was Utah week for Arizona State, number 13 Arizona State. They won. They went to 5 sets against Provo. Again, was named Provo. They played BYU, and then they won 15-7 over number 20 BYU. Cromartie is kind of we talk a lot about Jillian Sear.
Jillian Sear, is really good.
Cromartie had 16 kills for the Sun Devils, and Arizona State had 8 aces. Sear had 15 kills, and they had 19 digs as well too. So Argentina Ung did a little bit of everything: 56 assists, 9 digs, 5 blocks.
She's really good.
Yeah,
she's fun to watch. Pickup for them. She transferred from Washington State when that program kind of got cast to the wilderness, but great pickup for them. And Arizona State is red hot. They've won, 10 straight now because they beat the other Utah school, number 22 Utah, on Saturday. Arizona State is 10-1 in the Big 12. They're right there with Kansas, who is undefeated in the Big 12, and they're 2 games clear of TCU and Baylor for number 3.
Yeah, they play Wednesday night in Tempe, so that's another kind of that's their only time they'll play all year too. So the Big 12 could be decided Wednesday night. So tune into ESPN Plus to find out how that goes.
We'll see which has been decided first: the presidential election, if they have declared a winner by Wednesday night, or Arizona State, Kansas playing.
That's a good over/under. That's a good. I like that one. Last kind of notable match from across the nation: Georgia Tech. They prevented a reverse sweep by number 25 North Carolina on Sunday. They won the 5th set 15-12. Bertolino. There you go. 17 kills, 13 digs, 6 aces. Well, Tene had 13 kills, 15 digs. So the other
thing is, have to start putting first names in the show notes too.
I do. But you want a first name? One of the things that stood out to me, the North Carolina libero, she had 20 digs and 1 kill. So I will justice for liberos. I will celebrate when I see one get a kill.
Was it an overtime that dropped in the back corner like it usually is?
More than likely. I was looking at the box score. So props to Maddie May for getting that kill.
All right, let's take a look at professional volleyball here real quick in row 5. The Omaha Supernovas released their schedule for season 2 of the Pro Volleyball Federation. 14 home matches that the Supernovas are going to play at CHI Health Center. We have a new team in the league this year, right? Because Indianapolis, or is it just
Ignite? Indy Ignite, yeah.
Indy Ignite joins the league. And what did we identified? There was one busy weekend in March, right, where the Love Volleyball Omaha franchise is going to play a home match the same night as the Supernovas play a home match. And then what else is going on that day?
Oh, March Madness. So, well, it's the first weekend.
Opening Saturday of the NCAA tournament.
Yeah, tournament. Men and women will probably all play that weekend. So the Omaha Supernovas, they host the Indy Ignite on Saturday, March 22nd. And actually, the way that Love has it set up is 2 other teams will be travel. So it's like 3 teams that play one site one weekend. So
a triangular.
Triangular. Omaha has a match on Friday night, and then they also play on Saturday as well too. So other than that, I mean, not a lot of crossover. Every time that the Supernovas are gone, Love is playing. They'll play a lot of their matches at the Ralston Arena. So
I believe that weekend now referred to as the Liberty First Credit Union Arena.
Thank you. Good sponsorship plug. But the weekend, that March 22nd weekend, they're playing at Baxter Arena. So they kind of got a big place for that. So hoping to draw some big crowds for that. But the other takeaway that I had was I don't know if they took feedback, but they learned from last year, just crowd sizes, that when they play matches on weekends, they get a lot bigger crowds. So almost all of their home matches are going to be Friday, Saturday, Sunday. They got 2 Thursday matches, but everything else will be Friday night, Saturday night, and then they got a number of Saturday or Sunday afternoon, all the 3 p.m. starts. So kind of nice Sunday afternoon to go out to CHI and watch some Supernova volleyball. So I thought they learned a lot from the first year of when to schedule this. We'll get to see if this gets put on a TV or what kind of streaming platform it'll be on. But it's good to see that Omaha opens up with their rival. Like, we call it a rival. We'll call it rival. The Atlanta Vibe.
Another good team. Yeah. The Supernovas start the season on Friday, January 10th, and the season wraps up in early May. The playoffs and the championship are May 9th and May 11th.
Yeah, the to be announced site, but that's also a week earlier than last year. I think maybe they just were rushed a little bit in getting arena sites dates selected, but hopefully that will interfere less with the international calendar, so we won't miss any players, won't have to miss any international commitments because of their domestic league.
Mm-hmm. Also, Athletes Unlimited, I think, wrapped up their season this weekend. Where some members of the Supernovas are also playing in that league as well. And I say league, it's they're awarding championship points to the individuals. And former Supernovas outside hitter Betty De La Cruz was leading the points chase in that, I believe, heading into the weekend.
Yeah, they're playing their last match. I know there's a match on Sunday night. So, but Betty De La Cruz is was one of the captains. She has a good chance to win it, with possibly her and Brittany Abercrombie are kind of the 2 that are going back and forth for that individual title.
All right, let's move on to rotation 6, which is our preview of Nebraska's week ahead. Huskers have to go up to the Pacific Northwest and play Oregon and Washington. Let's start with Friday night at Oregon. Oregon's pretty good, man. Oregon is 17-4. They're one of the better offensive teams in the Big Ten. They hit 269, which I want to say is like 6th or 7th in the Big Ten. Oh, that's a Thursday night match. Excuse me. I don't want to screw up our listeners for that. So, yeah, Nebraska at Oregon on Thursday night. Mimi Collier, we mentioned her a little bit earlier in the Big Ten results. She's one of the best attackers in the conference. She played Nebraska as a freshman in the NCAA tournament a couple years ago. And do I have that right? Was Collier on the Oregon team? It
was her and Brooke Nuneviller. Now that Nebraska fans love her now, but it was her and Brooke Nuneviller.
She's great. Yeah. Mimi Collier averages 4 kills a set. Oregon has a couple of transfers also who are coming in and making a big difference. I'm going to really hope I get these names close to correct, but their middle blocker, Onye Ofegbu, is a transfer from UC Irvine. She averages 2.5 kills a set. They have another transfer outside hitter that's really good. The things that also jump out to you about Oregon is they win plays at the net. They're not just an offensive team anymore. Back in the day, Oregon would always have great setters and great attackers, and they hit 300, but they weren't the best defensive team. Well, this year they're 3rd in the Big Ten in blocks. They're averaging 2.8 blocks a set, and their resume is really good. The teams they've lost to are good teams. They've lost to number 1 Pitt. number 3 Penn State, number 7 Wisconsin, and then they lost in Seattle in 5 against Washington, which is always a big rivalry for Oregon. So that's who Nebraska's walking into on Thursday night in Eugene. That's a match that they play at Matthew Knight Arena, and the Huskers are going to have to bring their A game to win that one.
Yeah, and you look at kind of who. I mean, the one question mark the Oregon had coming into the season was who's going to run the offense too. They had a couple. They had no one on their roster that had recorded an assist in Division I volleyball, so you didn't know who that was. But the answer to that has been Kristen Klein, who's a redshirt freshman. So she sat out last year, was on the roster but did not play, and was really kind of taken control of what their offense does, and has done a good job too. I mean, she's leading the team in assists, obviously too, but it really kind of provides that stability that we're looking for. So,
well, Oregon traditionally is a West Coast team, by which I mean they like to run fast. Matt Ulmer's a good coach. Oregon likes to run, traditionally has run a faster offense. I haven't been able to watch a ton of them this year because I am usually in bed when most of their matches happen. I was able to stay up to watch the end of the Washington match the other day, but Washington presents their own challenge as well on Saturday. And where is that Washington USC match at right now?
It's 21-18. Washington's up in the third set too. So we don't have a result for you yet. You got to look that up when you listen to this podcast, or just go follow us on Twitter. We'll tweet about it there.
Well, going into Sunday's match, Washington's 17-4. They have to play. This is a tough week for Washington because Washington has to go to Minneapolis on Thursday and play at Minnesota, turn around and fly home and play Nebraska 2 days later on Saturday. We don't know what the health status of outside hitter Kirsten Barton is going to be, who left that match this weekend against Oregon with an injury. But she had double-digit kills in 6 straight matches coming into this week. She's their leading attacker, averaging 3.5 kills a set. And then real old Nebraska, well, not real old, but if you're a Nebraska volleyball sicko and you follow Nebraska recruiting like 5 or 6 years ago, the name Maddie Ensley might sound familiar to you. She's an outside hitter for Washington. She's their second leading attacker, averages almost 3 kills a set. She was actually a commitment to Nebraska at one time. She played high school ball in California, and then those two parties didn't end up tying the knot on that particular arrangement, and Maddie Ensley ends up going to Washington, where she's having a pretty nice career.
Nice. Oh, speaking of Nebraska volleyball sickos, Mia Taverdi plays for Oregon. She's been starting for them or playing lots of time at middle blocker. She is a Papillion La Vista graduate too. So there's another local tie-in for those volleyball sickos who, if you enjoy that, you can watch that too. So, but Washington, they were really, I don't know if they're one of the surprises. I mean, them and Michigan are kind of the teams that have overachieved this year from what preseason expectations were. They run a 6-2. They do a lot of things well. They're top 10 in blocks and aces
in the conference.
Yeah, they did lose 4 matches in a row, and we'll see if they can how they do against USC too. But then I think they took the right route by easing themselves in. They were one of the last dozen or so undefeated teams in the nation, but part of that was because they didn't have a very challenging non-conference season. So, but we'll see. They, like you said, I think that travel is going to be a little bit tough. We saw that with USC and UCLA kind of had to do the same thing when they both played at Nebraska and then went home to play another team at home after playing on the road too. So we'll have to see what that looks like.
You're making the most of that Alaska Airlines sponsorship. I don't know if Alaska Airlines runs flights into Minneapolis. They probably do. Minneapolis got a great airport.
Well, and then Oregon's doing the same thing too. I mean, they host Nebraska on Thursday, but then they have to go to Minnesota on Saturday. So Minnesota maybe is the beneficiary of the long travel trip, but that's the closest non-West Coast opponent in the Big Ten.
All right. That is the show for today. Thank you so much for listening. If you are a newcomer to Volleyball State, please subscribe and give us a good review on whatever podcast hosting platforms you're listening to us on. That helps us grow the show and grow the conversation about volleyball in this country. If you love the show so much, you want to wear it on your sleeve, literally, we do have merch. You can go to hurrdatsports.com/shop and get your Bald Set Spike shirts, your Volleyball State merch, your Justice for Liberos t-shirts. Man, I was just thinking this weekend when I was watching games, like how good defense in college volleyball is right now. people are digging balls on, like, every team has a good DS or a libero. I can't count how many times I watched a Nebraska match this year, and I will not be at all familiar with the other team's libero. And I'm like, oh, they're pretty good. Like, nobody's just shanking balls, and it's becoming tougher and tougher to get balls down now. So the liberos are a growing phenomenon across the country.
That's why we can't disrespect them. They got to have their justice too. Give them their props. So you get your merch, wear it with pride. So you can also follow us on Twitter at Volleyball Pod. Email us any thoughts, questions, interesting things, stuff you want me to ask John Cook. Great, I'll do it for you. At volleyballstate@gmail.com. You can follow me Twitter at Lincoln_VB and look for all of my content coming out from Huskers Illustrated and other media outlets that I write for occasionally.
And subscribe to the Volleyball State Substack. It's absolutely free. No reason not to do it. You can find me on Twitter at @ByJeffSheldon. Thanks so much to Kahm Broham for producing today's show, as he always does. Does such a great job getting us up on the air. Thanks to Hurrdat Sports. You can follow all the Hurrdat Sports shows, and there are so many of them on social media and YouTube. Thank you so much. We'll be back next week with another episode of Volleyball State.